Welcome back, PlayBASIC coders. I posted a bug the other day. It was on the forums. It was quite abstract. It was giving weird results. It breaks down to something like this. And the reason it's a problem turns out to be what I thought it was originally was not what it turned out to be, like most of these things actually. I'm running in the old Learning Edition here. We'll see if this one suffers from the bug. It would actually impact compilation, so it would stop compiling and just exit like that. So this is the old Learning Edition, so this bug goes back to at least that far. Alright, so we've loaded up 164p. Let's check if it's faulty in this as well. Hit run. Yep. Okay, this is 165. Let's try same program. You get the point. It's just dying in the compiler. Now, if I change this literal here, if I made it into a variable or did a few other things to it, that would make the program actually work. And there you see. Why this happens is a very convoluted reason. It goes back to when PlayBASIC used classic versions of PB only actually had, they didn't have integers, they were all floats. So the theory was at the time is that, well, floats will become the dominant thing, and then soon after that we added a dedicated integer table and a dedicated floating point table and string table and those things. So different types of variables live in different tables. At some point, the code that backs up an expression, which is actually needed occasionally, it turns out this expression here calls this backup process. I'm not quite sure why off the top of my head, but it does do this. And that backup process was so old that it didn't actually support integer data. It was just all the numeric values were floats. Now, for most things, it's irrelevant. It works quite well, but values like this are basically not numbers. They crash the FPU. So what was happening is this copy process was putting the FPU into a weird state, and then the next operation was a float would then crash it. And that would happen inside the backup, this kind of backup expression function. Now, since then, I've actually replaced all of that. I don't recall ever running into this before, which is strange because I would have thought this would have been something that would happen more frequently than not, but clearly not. And it only really happens when you do this, because the expression, as new expressions are tokenized and imported into the expression buffer to be solved, this data here wasn't being overwritten. So the backup process is, I think it's just copying the whole buffer across because it's just like easier to do that. And that was causing it. A couple of weird legacy routines that once I worked out what the problem was, it's like, oh, that's the problem? Okay. It was so abstract, it actually took days of just trying to refine what's causing the problem, which is initially like you could do weird things like you put like variable assignments here, and that would often make it work. Try some more. What if we did something like this. Now it works. Still running the old version. And the reasoning for that is this expression buffer that's hidden away, that's being solved, it would be overwriting this value. Alright, I'll change versions again and we'll see the latest version build and run. Here we go with today's build. It's got the required patches made to it, and we should be able to run this straight out. Perfectly fine. What actually caused, what revealed this was me slightly changing the mini golf example from the boards. The timer here, the problem with timer is that it's an unsigned value, and we have signed integers. So sometimes it's just easier to get rid of the sign and just deal with a 31-bit value rather than 32, which is why I was masking off the value here. So it doesn't matter whether the timer is positive or negative in my value here. And it would be treated as negative because the top bit would be set. That only occurs for systems where the machine's been left on for basically whatever it is, weeks, months, or whatever it is. I have no idea, top of my head. So anyway, what happened was I went to add the simple patch, and I went to run this and no balls were appearing. I thought, that's strange. I thought, oh, okay, the timer's returning a negative value. So I'll mask off the sign bit, and then it started to crash during compile time. It's like, oh, that's a very odd thing. And the more I played with it, the more I messed around with it, the stranger it became. Wow, so the last probably, I don't know, 2-3 days have been hunting down that weird reason. So I'm sure this bug was something that would impact other programs, and probably seemingly randomly because of the way the expression buffer is not cleared between new expressions. It doesn't really need to be. It sets the data it needs, and old data is just kind of left there until it's overwritten. I was going to post a version of this golf thing because it's a very old example, but it shows a few different ideas from PB up and running. One is using an image. The background is 3 different colours of green, and the ball's speed is determined by what colour of green we're standing on. That's all. And we're using a whirl and bouncing off the whirl as well. This is pretty old. I don't know, 10 years old or something like that. It's old enough that it runs in the old Learning Edition. So, and that is easily 10 years old. Actually, probably well past 10 years old, to be honest. Alrighty, that's enough of that, and very happy to see the end of that problem. These kind of problems are terrifying when you can't track down a direct line to what's causing something. It's an undefined, wishy-washy thing. You're like, oh, I went through all the different phases of grief trying to work out what this was going to be, which sounds crazy, but that's what happens when you find these kind of things. Particularly when you're right at the end of this thing and you're trying to get the last little bits cleaned up and done, and then you run into something like this and delays the whole thing yet again, and people go, why is it taking so long? It's like, yeah. But nonetheless, that's fixed. Hopefully we haven't caused any other cascading problems from this, because there might well be some other program now that compiles differently because we've changed the backup process to something else. This is how crazy this stuff can be, is that you know, the phraser might have left some breadcrumb. We're not aware of it today, then who knows? I don't think so, but you never know. Alright, dudes, I'll leave you to it. See ya. Bye.